A 14-year-old boy from a royal Jewish family gets captured and dragged right into the heart of Babylon, the land of magic, the land of kings. But this very boy, step by step, rises to a place where kings bow before him, where even dreams fear him, and where lions don't even dare to get close. Who is he, really? A prophet? A sorcerer? Or maybe a hidden secret between earth and the heavens? This is the story of Daniel, and what you're about to hear isn't a legend, it's history. I'm Merritt, and you're watching Puzzle Fact. Before we dive in, please support us with a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Around 600 years before Christ, about 2,500 years ago, in the Holy Land of Palestine, the city of Jerusalem stood as the sacred heart of the Jewish people. Its ancient walls echoed with the history of Israel for thousands of years. But times were changing. The Babylonian Empire, led by Nebuchadnezzar, a ruthless conqueror with unstoppable ambition, was spreading its shadow over Jerusalem. And in the middle of this chaos, Daniel was born. His name meant, "God is my judge," a sign of deep faith and the link between this young boy and the great destiny waiting for him. At that time, Jerusalem was caught in political and spiritual turmoil. After conquering parts of the Jewish lands, Nebuchadnezzar ordered that some of the best and brightest young men from royal and noble Jewish families be taken to Babylon to strengthen his court and blend them into the culture and power of Babylon. As it says in the book of Daniel, chapter 1, verses 3 to 6, the king ordered the chief of his court officials to bring in some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. Young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand. And since Daniel was from the noble families of Israel, he was captured when he was around 13 or 14 years old. These chosen young men were placed under strict training in the Babylonian court to learn a new language, a new culture, and to eventually serve the king himself. Among these young captives, Daniel and his 3 close friends were chosen out of thousands, brilliant, faithful, and unyielding, to stand in the courts of Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel and his friends were taken to an empire that once held the world in its iron grip. They became like bright stars in the darkness, standing in the very heart of Babylon. They were brought into the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, and their Hebrew names were changed, tying them to the language and culture of Babylon so they could serve in the king's court. But this change of name, it was only the beginning. Daniel and his friends had to train under Babylon's greatest scholars, learning philosophy, astronomy, mathematics, and the mysterious languages of Babylon, preparing them to one day become the king's advisors. But Daniel chose a different path. He and his friends refused to eat the king's food, which was forbidden under Jewish law. It was a bold move, a silent rebellion against the absolute power of the king. They insisted on eating only grains and drinking water. At that time, Babylon was a legendary city on the banks of the Euphrates River, the center of the world, with its massive walls, towering ziggurats, and ancient temples. A place where culture, power, and religion blended together under the mighty reign of Nebuchadnezzar, who stood at the very peak of this world. Years passed since Daniel and his friends first entered Babylon. They had gone from young captives to respected scholars in the king's court. But no one truly knew the power they held within them. Until that night, the night when Nebuchadnezzar, the greatest king of the East, was struck by a nightmare that stole the peace from his soul. It's a suffocating night. Nebuchadnezzar twists and turns on his royal bed, sweat dripping down his forehead. A scream rips through the silence, jolting him awake. His eyes snap open. His breathing is heavy, his voice shaking. Guards, magicians, sorcerers, bring them all.
Guards, magicians, summon them all, now!
On that astonishing night, the grand hall of the palace is filled with adorned faces, robes embroidered with gold. Astrologers, sorcerers, priests. The king sits on his throne, his face still troubled. With a voice full of anger, he roars, "I've seen a dream. No, I cannot remember it, but it has burned my soul. You must tell me what it was and what it means." A deadly silence. Faces freeze. No one dares to speak. "Your Majesty, if you tell us the dream, we will interpret it." Nebuchadnezzar shouts, "You are all worthless. If you cannot tell me the dream itself, you will all be destroyed." Eyes fall to the ground. Guards stand ready to execute all the wise men of Babylon. Amid this chaos, a young Hebrew, Daniel, steps forward, his eyes bright, his demeanor calm. "Tell the king, the God of the heavens will reveal the secret." For 3 nights, Daniel and his friends fast and pray. And at last, a vision comes to him, the very same dream that had tormented the king. After 3 days and nights of prayer, fasting, and supplication, Daniel returns to the court. Nebuchadnezzar stares, waiting, suspicion in his eyes. And then Daniel enters, calm, dignified, unshaken. He begins to speak. First, he tells the king exactly what he saw in his dream. The mighty king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, had a strange dream. In his dream, a massive statue stood before him. This statue was made of different metals. Its head was made of gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its belly and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron. Its feet were a mix of iron and baked clay. Suddenly, a stone, cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands, came crashing down onto the statue's feet. The feet shattered, and the entire statue came tumbling down, turning into dust, carried away by the wind. But that stone, it grew larger and larger until it became a mountain that filled the entire earth. And then Daniel explained the meaning. Small blue diamond, the head of gold. That's you, O Nebuchadnezzar, King of Kings. The chest of silver? A kingdom will rise after you. According to many interpretations, this beast represents the empire of the Medes and the Persians. Belly of bronze? A third kingdom. Interpreted as Greece, the legs of iron and clay. A divided kingdom, part strong, part weak. Many believe this one represents the Roman Empire or even the age of the end times. And some say we're living in that chapter of history right now. But in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. The king honored Daniel, declaring, "Truly, your God is the God of gods and the revealer of mysteries." Daniel 2, verse 47. Nebuchadnezzar orders that Daniel be made ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed in charge of all its wise men. From the depths of captivity, Daniel rose to the peak of power, not through the sword, not through deceit, but through wisdom and faith. Now, let us move forward to witness another of the most important nights in Daniel's life, the night when the walls began to speak. After Nebuchadnezzar, his grandson Belshazzar ruled Babylon during his father's absence. A violent man, his actions would lead to Babylon's fall to the Persians in 539 BC. One night, Belshazzar threw a grand feast for 1,000 of Babylon's nobles. In the middle of the drunken celebration, he ordered the sacred cups stolen from the temple in Jerusalem to be brought in so they could drink wine from them, dishonoring the God of Israel. But suddenly, a mysterious hand appeared and began writing on the palace wall. The king's face turned pale, his knees knocked together, and he trembled with fear. He called for his magicians and wise men, but none of them could read the writing or interpret its meaning. The queen, likely Belshazzar's mother, enters the hall. She says, "There is a man in your kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. His name is Daniel." Daniel is called. He enters with calm dignity. Belshazzar, desperate, offers him riches. "If you can interpret this, you will wear purple robes and be the third ruler in the kingdom." But Daniel, with quiet authority, replies, "Keep your gifts for yourself, but I will read the writing." And he begins, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. That same night, Belshazzar was killed. Some accounts say that on the night Babylon fell, Belshazzar, terrified, fled to the rear gates of the palace. In the chaos, the gate guards, not recognizing him, struck him down. Even historians like Flavius Josephus confirm this event as the moment power shifted from Babylon to Persia. Belshazzar was the last true king of Babylon. In 539 BC, Cyrus the Great, founder of the Persian Empire, entered Babylon without bloodshed. Darius the Mede, likely Gobryas, one of Cyrus' generals, took charge of the kingdom under Cyrus' authority. Babylonian inscriptions confirm the end of Belshazzar's reign, and the Cyrus cylinder also records the Persian conquest of Babylon, marking the end of the Babylonian Empire. In 539 BC, Babylon, the capital of the Chaldean Empire, fell to Cyrus the Great, ending the rule of Nebuchadnezzar's dynasty. But what happened to Daniel? Daniel, who had been taken to Babylon as a Jewish captive during Nebuchadnezzar's campaigns, rose to high rank because of his wisdom and faith. When Cyrus conquered Babylon, Daniel not only retained his position, but became known as one of the top advisors in the Persian court. According to the Bible, Daniel prospered during the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Under the reign of Darius the Mede, something remarkable happens. Babylon is no longer under Nebuchadnezzar's descendants. The mighty Persian Empire now rules the East. Darius, seeking to govern his vast empire, appoints 120 satraps to oversee the provinces. Above them, he appoints 3 administrators. At the top, Daniel, now old with white hair, but eyes still clear and steadfast. Darius trusts him completely and plans to set him over the entire kingdom. But as in every age, there are always the jealous, the ambitious, the whisperers in the shadows. They say, there is no corruption in Daniel, except in his faith. He prays to his God. They hatch a cunning plan and approach the king. "O king, issue a decree that for 30 days, no one may pray to any god or man except you. Whoever disobeys will be thrown into the lion's den. Let be according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked." In the Persian system, the law of the Medes and Persians meant that once a king signed a law, not even he could revoke it, a crucial trap they set for Daniel. Darius, unaware of their true intent, seals the decree. These men were likely Babylonian nobles or regional officials who resented the rise of Daniel, a Jewish exile, to such high power. In an upper room, facing Jerusalem, Daniel opens his windows. As he had always done, he kneels 3 times a day and prays to his God. The conspirators, smiling coldly, wait in the shadows. And now, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, Daniel is arrested and condemned. When Darius hears what has happened, he is shaken. He wants to save Daniel. All day, he searches for a way out, but the law of the Persians cannot be changed. At sunset, Darius summons Daniel. With sorrow in his eyes, he says, "May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you." And so, Daniel is thrown into the lion's den. A stone is placed over the mouth of the den, sealed with the king's signet ring. The night passes bitterly. The king neither eats nor sleeps, pacing the palace, heavy with regret and fear. All right, so here's the deal with the lion's den you've heard about in the story of Daniel. It was most likely a big underground stone pit with a heavy door on top that they would lock shut. Inside, starving lions kept there specifically for execution by lions. Yeah, that was a thing, especially for people who committed serious crimes or were accused of betraying the king's authority. In fact, in Babylonian and Assyrian sources, we find mentions of wild animals being used for punishments. If you look at the Assyrian reliefs found in the Palace of Nineveh, you can actually see royal hunts with lions, showing that keeping lions in royal courts was pretty normal back then. And it's very likely this whole lion punishment idea moved from Assyria to Babylon over time. Candle back to the story. In the deep darkness of the pit, lions are growling. You can hear their heavy breaths echoing in the dark. But then, an angel descends from heaven, and the lion's mouth shut. Daniel is sitting there in silence on a cold stone, eyes closed, whispering his prayers. At dawn, the king rushes to the pit, terrified, calling out for Daniel. And a voice rises up from the depths. "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths. I was found innocent before him, and also before you." And the king, relieved and overjoyed, orders that Daniel be lifted out of the pit. Not a scratch on him, but sometime later, Daniel faces the most important moment of his life. Or perhaps the most important, a return to the place of promise. Imagine this. In an age when empires rose from the ashes of war and captivity, and kings wrote the destiny of nations with the ink of wisdom and the blade of the sword, there stood a man who changed history, not with a sword, but with faith. Cyrus the Great. In the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Ezra, it says, "In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus to make a proclamation throughout his realm. Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon in 539 BCE, and in the very first year of his rule there, he issued a decree allowing the Jews to return to their land and rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. In an age where kings ruled with swords, a man from Persia rose to conquer the world with wisdom and mercy. Cyrus was the kind of king that even his enemies spoke of with respect. He opened the gates of Babylon, not for plunder, but for freedom. The Jews called him the Messiah of God. A Persian king whose single decree shook the heart of history and became a voice for justice in a world drowning in oppression. Cyrus was the architect of the world's conscience, the voice of justice in a silent world. And his decree turned exile into freedom. Here's something cool. In 1879, the Cyrus cylinder was discovered in Babylon. It's a clay cylinder written in Akkadian cuneiform, and some scholars consider it the first charter of human rights. Even though it doesn't directly mention the Jews, it aligns with the biblical account of Cyrus' decree to free them. According to some Jewish traditions and commentaries like the Midrash, Daniel had significant influence in Cyrus' court. They say Daniel himself read the prophecies of Isaiah to Cyrus, prophecies written 150 years earlier, calling Cyrus by name the Messiah of God. Isaiah 45 verse 1. That's actually rare. The book of Isaiah directly names Cyrus a non-Jewish king, and even calls him the Messiah of God, meaning God's chosen one. Here's what the verse says. "This is what the Lord says to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I take hold of the subdue nations before him, and to strip kings of their armor." During this period, Cyrus ruled from Pasargadae and later Susa, while Babylon remained a major center. Daniel was actively present between these three, especially in Babylon and Susa. Let's now arrive at the final chapter of Daniel's eventful life. Years after the fall of Babylon, Cyrus the Great lay in his grand tomb at Pasargadae, and Darius the Great carried the empire's crown. By this time, Daniel, once a captive from Jerusalem, had become a respected elder and wise counselor in the Persian royal court. He had lived through the reigns of three powerful kings, Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus, and Darius. In his later years, Daniel settled in Susa, an ancient city that was once a capital of Elam and later of the Achaemenid Empire. There, Daniel was not a captive anymore, but an honored sage, deeply respected. It's as if Persia embraced him as a precious jewel. In the final years of his life, Daniel had visions that are still debated by Jewish, Christian, and Muslim scholars today. He spoke of the rise of four empires, of the final battle between good and evil, of the end times and resurrection. The book of Daniel ends with these profound, mysterious visions, marking the beginning of apocalyptic literature as we know it. Let me tell you about one of Daniel's most famous and mysterious dreams. One night, Daniel had a vision. He saw four massive beasts rising out of the sea. The first was like a lion with eagle's wings. The second was a bear with ribs in its mouth. The third was a leopard with four wings and four heads. And the fourth was a terrifying beast with iron teeth and many horns. Then, from this monstrous beast, a small horn appeared. It had eyes, it had a mouth, and it started waging war against the holy ones. But then, the thrones of judgment were set, and the Ancient of Days appeared, a symbol of God, the eternal judge, and the power of that final beast was destroyed. They represented four great empires of the world. The lion was Babylon. The bear was Medo-Persia. The leopard was Greece. The final beast was Rome. The small horn represented a future oppressive kingdom, an anti-holy power that would rise during the end times. And the Ancient of Days, arriving to judge, it was a promise that all oppression will end and a kingdom of true justice will begin. This dream is deeply philosophical and symbolic, and has been interpreted across Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions as a prophecy of a coming savior and the end of tyrannical rule. In the end, Daniel passed away at an old age in peace. There are many stories about where exactly Daniel was buried. Some say Babylon, some say Susa, and others say Jordan or Egypt. But according to Islamic tradition and local stories in Iran, Daniel's resting place is Susa. Today in Susa, there's a tomb with a cone-shaped dome known as the Tomb of Prophet Daniel. It's a place respected by Muslims, Jews, and Christians alike. Nearby is the ancient Susa Bridge and the Karkare River, and locals believe that even today, the river carries the whispers of the prophet within its waves. And so, Daniel's final gaze was not toward death, but toward a horizon where the fate of nations would unfold. He left this world, but the echo of his dreams still rings through the corridors of history, like a sword of light piercing the darkness. And time itself walks gently upon the soil where once stood a man who lived not for power, but for truth.